Hey, Foot Clan, great show for you today. We're going through more of the wide receiver rankings. Before we do that, I want to tell you about the Secret to Victory podcast. It's a new podcast from Gatorade and Gimlet Creative about how the best athletes in the world use defeat to fuel a win. This week, you'll hear from J.J. Watt himself on how he worked his way from college walk-on to NFL Defensive Player of the Year. Visit Gatorade.com/podcast to listen now or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, this is Eric Dickerson, NFL Hall of Famer, and you're listening to the Fantasy Footballers Podcast.
Welcome to the Fantasy Footballers Podcast, coming to you from the Play Draft Studios with your hosts, Andy Holloway, Jason Moore, and Mike Wright.
Welcome in. Come on in. Come on in.
Have a seat.
Have a seat.
Continue to drive.
Wait, yeah, I mean, most people are sitting while they drive.
Well, I mean,
After that Segway craze went away.
you've never done the standing drive?
Nope.
It's wild.
Yeah, welcome in to the podcast, the Fantasy Footballers.
It's not safe, but
Andy,
it's wild.
Mike, and Jason once again here. If you are joining us for the first time, extra special welcome to you. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the Foot Clan. Welcome to our world of fantasy football. We're here every day of the week, and this podcast is all about equipping you to dominate your fantasy football league.
I really wanted
Plain
to
and
sing Willy Wonka there.
Why, when I was welcoming them in?
Yes. I held it back, though. Maybe I'll debut that
There
later.
are some parallels there.
In a world. All right.
It's going to be a great show today. Have a good quick question. We'll touch on a little bit of news, and then we'll get right into part 2 of our wide receiver ranking episode. If you missed part 1, yesterday we went through the top 10 wide receivers on our rankings, getting you ready for your fantasy league, equipping you, helping you make better decisions for your draft day. That's what this show's all about. We want you to have a great league. We want you to dominate that league, and we want you to have fun from week 1 through week 17, and even beyond.
Yeah,
because we're here all year long.
Well, we would prefer that week 17 you're celebrating your hashtag Foot Clan title and not playing your championship week.
That's
But
right.
If you're playing, then we're here for you then too.
You know what you can do in week 17? You could walk into your man cave, and you can glance at your autographed David Johnson helmet.
One of you could.
One of you can, because we are giving away an autographed full-size David Johnson helmet. We love giving stuff away to the Foot Clan. This is an amazing piece. If you go on Twitter, you'll see Jason holding it up like a cherished.
Like he's holding it up like Simba.
On Pride
that's
Rock.
Exactly what was in my mind. Thank you, Mike. You nailed it.
And it's free to enter. Go to footclangiveaway.com. Now, one of the ways you can enter that giveaway, so there's a bunch of different ways you can get extra entries to win the autographed David Johnson helmet. One of the ways you can do that is to leave a review for a brand new podcast. We have, the Fantasy Footballers have a brand new podcast. Now, every Friday last year, if you were with us, you remember, we had Chris Meany from the Fantasy Sports Network come on. We did like a 5-minute segment on Fridays.
For
all
DFS.
about DFS, for Daily Fantasy Sports, FanDuel, Play Draft, DraftKings, to talk about some strategy. Now, we know not everybody's a DFS player, but we didn't want to, make Fridays all about DFS or anything like that. So we came out with a once-a-week podcast. Now, Mike is hosting it. Chris Meany is on it. Ben Cummins is on it, one of our great writers. The show is already out. You can go find it on iTunes. We'd love your iTunes reviews for that show. And it's going to be once a week. And look, I'm telling you, I wanted to be the one to announce this because I am on the outside looking in on this one a little bit. Mike is hosting this show. And I want to tell you, this is high-quality stuff. This is about making DFS accessible, whether you are a first-time player or whether you are an experienced DFS player. There is something exciting about the tips and insights that these guys bring in only the fantasy footballers kind of way. This is DFS for the rest of us.
That's exactly right. Where we bring you the information on this show. We're talking your season-long, your redraft leagues in a way it's for everyone to hear, right?
Yeah,
and that's exactly what we're trying to do with the Daily Fantasy Podcast, the Fantasy Footballers DFS podcast, because honestly, the world of DFS can be very intimidating, can be very confusing, because there's a lot of different factors that need to be thought of and strategies. So we're breaking it down over there on the DFS.
Yeah, so
pod.
if you're a DFS player and you want to check that out, every week that's going to come out, a brand new episode with
if
Mike
you've never
and Chris.
played.
Yep, exactly. So just type in Fantasy Footballers DFS or Fantasy Footballers on the iTunes store. It's on Google Play as well, and you can subscribe and listen to that if you like. All right, quick question of the day, guys. Does having to start 3 wide receivers instead of the standard 2 change your draft strategy?
It
Does
definitely
it change your bench strategy?
I think that is the real key is your bench. We've spoke a lot about the fact that in normal home leagues, redraft leagues, you want to have, more running backs or at least as many running backs as you do wide receivers.
More lotto tickets.
Yes, exactly. When you leave your draft. But if you are starting 3 wide receivers and only 2 running backs, as far as necessary starts, regardless of your flex, if you have to start 3, then it does change how deep your wide receivers need to be. And also when you're in those middle earlier rounds, you got to think to yourself, playing matchups is going to really matter. You will start more than likely, if you're in any kind of PPR, and have a flex 4 wide receivers a week. So that means you have to have quality depth and not just meandering Allen Hurns in their starting. So in those leagues, it's all the more reason to draft your quarterback and your tight end very, very late, just to make sure that those rosters, when your opponent doesn't have the ability to play matchups, you don't win your championship at the draft. You win it making the right start-sit decisions, and you can't make the right start-sit decisions if you don't have the options on your roster. So I think it makes a big difference.
And scoring format is huge for this. If you're playing in a PPR, 3 wide receivers, and there's a flex spot, I mean, you're talking that wide receivers are more valuable than running backs, where if I'm in a PPR 3 wide, of course I'm still taking David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell first, and Zeke, which maybe with the news on the Zeke suspension is supposed to come soon. We still don't have it. But after that, I mean, you can start – you need to have these wide receivers. You need to have a high-powered arsenal in the wide receiver crew, and I'm going to start skewing that way, especially if it's PPR. I'm going to be playing 4 wide receivers, so you have to take that into account as well.
I don't really have anything else to add. You guys hit that one right on the head. So I'm not going to have we're going to jump back into the rankings. A couple things I want to mention first. We're not going to do a full news, and some of you might be saying, well, where's your preseason reaction? And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of hold that until all the preseason games are over, and we're going to give you our full week 1 thoughts on Monday and some of the things that we're going to focus on and some things I want to remind people about in the preseason. The stats are not the most important thing in the preseason. In fact, they're one of the least important things. Limited reps. You're in with the different defenses. You're in with different personnel groupings. What do we watch for? We'll talk a lot about it on Monday. We'll talk about what we saw this past weekend and what we're watching for. Don't necessarily overreact to everything you see, but we're going to kind of filter the information and the things that have happened. And remember, week 2, week 3, those are the times when you see a lot more reps from the starters, a lot more things that you can kind of look at and say, okay, they might be, Jason said he wanted to see what the Tennessee wide receiver core is going to look like, what the personnel groupings are going to look like. It's going to be a lot easier to see when the starters are out there for a quarter or 2, maybe 3 quarters even in week 3, and he can make more of a judgment call based on that. So I'm excited to get into all of that. Mike just brought up Ezekiel Elliott. That's the one piece of news worth mentioning. More reports coming out. Basically, nothing official saying he is suspended, but it's just looking stronger. It's a guarantee that he will get some sort of suspension, and that's why he's down in my ranks already, is because I took the side of, okay, he's going to get suspended.
Yeah, and
you all right there?
My throat's
you're a little
dying.
froggy today.
Jane Slater from the NFL Network is saying it looks like they're expecting it to be closer to the 6 games than the 1 or 2. So we will be monitoring. I would not be surprised if this doesn't break while we're on this show. I think today is going to be the day.
I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't break till next year too. I mean, the way that the NFL is handling this. Are we about to jump into wide receivers?
You bet we are.
Because we cannot move to the wide receivers until I announce this.
The beard's coming off.
No.
Oh, sorry.
BallersLive.com, the show, the live podcast that we are putting on. We're taking the podcast out of the studio. We're taking it to the stage. We're going to be mixing it up with Foot Clan. BallersLive.com. The tickets are, if you're hearing this, that means the tickets are on sale officially. The show is on Labor Day, September 4th. It's a Monday night. It's going to be just –
you should probably mention it's in Phoenix, Arizona.
It's in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm getting there. I'm just so excited about
Mike
this.
Mike is really excited.
I really, really, really hope you can be there. Tickets will be limited, so if you want in, ballerslive.com.
What I can tell you is this is Mike's baby.
Yeah.
Like, Mike has wanted to do this for a long time. I think we've all wanted to have a meet and greet and do that, but Mike has been wanting this the most, and I can promise you he's going to make it fun.
Yes.
Because of the excitement he has for this event, it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to spend as much time as possible with everybody. And
pictures and hugs for everyone.
There you go. BallersLive.com. You can grab them now.
Wide receivers.
Oh, to see the future. How nice would that be for our wide receiver rankings?
I would be infinitely wealthy, my friend.
I was on a podcast yesterday.
I'd be Biff Tannen.
And somebody asked me about, look, every year you have a certain amount of players in those first 3 rounds that just plain disappoint, to put it the best, and pure busts, to put it otherwise. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins is a great example of that. And they asked me who I thought might disappoint players.
Uh-oh.
And I actually went with number 11 on our list as a possibility. And a lot of that just has to do with his average draft position right now. But Doug Baldwin comes in at number 11 on our wide receiver rankings. And no disrespect to Doug Baldwin, the player. I think he's just one of those absolutely great, just a perfect complement to a team. Probably not what you would consider a prototypical wide receiver 1 in the NFL, but certainly in fantasy has performed like it before. Last week he had 5 separate weeks.
Last
season he had 5 separate weeks where he was inside the top 7 on that week's fantasy scoring. So he can deliver the boom.
Yeah, but the problem
is going in the back of the 2nd round in PPR leagues.
Well, he's
and
finally getting the respect.
I know, we waited for it for years. But now I'm a little uncomfortable.
now that we're finally respecting him, you're not respecting him.
You're right. The headline, it's like the pendulum is swung. The headline thing for me though last year was that despite finishing the season as the 10th best fantasy wide receiver, which congratulations to Baldwin. 31% of the time he was a wide receiver 1 or 2. That's not a good number.
No, that's really bad.
So I say all that. He's 13 on my list. That's respect. That's not a 1. I'm not giving him the 1 respect, but number 11 on our list. What do you guys think about Doug Baldwin?
Yeah, I mean he gets this because he's not a super flashy player, and he ends the year with a good amount of receptions. He gets the incorrect idea that he's consistent. He's a very inconsistent receiver over the last few years. He's put his touchdowns together in the same games, so often where when he hits, he's on fire, and that's why he goes up those rankings. I do have hope that he has a true, like, his best year still could be this year. It would make sense because of what we saw last year from the health of Russell Wilson in the first half. So if he comes out this year and has a career year and is unbelievably great, I'm not going to be shocked. I've always, of the 3 of us, been the biggest believer in Doug Baldwin. I think he is a really talented wide receiver, and his rapport with Russell Wilson is as good as any connection in the league. But I do worry about – I would never want Doug Baldwin ever to be my wide receiver 1 on a team.
That's where I was going to go.
People ask the question all the time, like, what running back are you – like, what's the last running back you're most comfortable with as your 1? Doug Baldwin is not in the equation for me
for the wide receiver.
For my wide receiver one that
and
I don't think you're going to win that way.
I think we're going to get a lot of pushback on Baldwin because when we did our last mock draft, I think we passed on him, and a lot of the response was, "What? How in the world did you not take Baldwin there?" I've seen Baldwin go ahead of Dez in a lot of drafts.
What?
And
oh, come on.
Well, look, I want to take the time to say the good. I mean, 94 receptions. We had that. Remember yesterday we talked about Michael Thomas and that catch percentage? Mm-hmm. Baldwin's right with him. It's 75%. I mean, he's incredible when it comes to Russell Wilson gets out of the pocket. He finds his guy. I'm very enthusiastic, though, about Paul Richardson making a contribution, about Jimmy Graham, and about Procise. Like, those guys can all contribute in the passing game. So I'm with Jason. You took the words out of my mouth, apparently out of Mike's mouth. If he's my 2, I'm just super excited. I love him as my 2.
So the way that a draft would fall, let's say you're number 2 overall, you got Le'Veon Bell. On your way back, you grab another running back. So you're saying you would not be looking to take Doug Baldwin on that short turn?
At that point, I
Probably
would go.
not.
Yeah, at that point, if I'm looking for my 1, I would rather have like Sammy Watkins or even Demaryius Thomas.
You would reach for Watkins in that?
Yeah, and that's a good example of, sometimes when you look at just rankings and you say, you don't always draft exactly according to ranking because of roster construction.
Yes.
And those things matter. I'm looking for someone that is, a consistent one.
Let's talk about Demaryius Thomas. He's number 12 on our rankings. One of the more interesting things about Thomas is he's, 90 receptions last year. He's always been consistent when it comes to being on the field, having a high reception total. It's been a while since he's had those double-digit touchdown numbers. Here's something that is interesting to me. He only gained 20 or more yards on 10 of those 90 receptions. That's really low. That's 35th out of 39 qualifying wide receivers. That's 11% of the time. So Demaryius was reliable, but Demaryius wasn't flashy the way he has been in the past. So, Jason, you said you'd take him over Baldwin to be your 1. What are some of the things to look for from Demaryius Thomas this year as he comes in as the last of our wide receiver 1s here in the rankings?
Well, you've got a situation where, first off, Demaryius Thomas has been, he's the longest running, receiver right now with over 1,000 yards.
5 straight years
in consecutive seasons. So he always gets
barely.
that job.
He barely got over it this year.
But last year he had Trevor Siemian as a first-year, teammate, and this year coming in, I think it will be clear by the end of the preseason that Trevor Siemian will be the quarterback. That's kind of my projection for the Broncos. And I think going into year 2, the offensive line being improved this season, I believe what you saw last year from Demaryius Thomas was his floor. And nobody was, Demaryius Thomas wasn't exciting last year. Nobody feels like, they put – DT put him on their back and took him to a championship. But if that's his floor, and I know his ceiling is much higher, we've seen it forever with him, I believe that's just the type of player I look for as my 1.
Siemian is Alex Smith. He might be a lot like Alex Smith for fantasy production. It's kind of crazy because if you look at the other guys that are that low in the 20-plus yards receiving, catch percentage, it's Beasley, Larry Fitzgerald, and Anquan Boldin. All 3 of those you expect to be in the dink and dunk universe. Right. And suddenly, look, I said it. He's like a tall Jarvis Landry right now. That's the way Demaryius Thomas is coming across to me. Like the way I used to think about putting Jarvis in my lineup is the way I think about putting Demaryius in my lineup. It's nice that he can make an impact in the red zone and surprise you with touchdowns.
He's like a seatbelt. I mean, you should put your seatbelt on, and you should draft Demaryius Thomas because he's safe. And while
144 targets.
I mean, I think that last season may have been his floor, but I think it's pretty close to his ceiling. Demaryius Thomas is one of the hardest guys to evaluate because you look at his history and what he has done, but then you have to realize he did that with Peyton Manning, who was putting up historic touchdown numbers, except for, of course, Peyton Manning's last year. And I'm with Jason. I think that Trevor Siemian's the quarterback, But Demaryius Thomas is very safe to me. I think that he has a 90-plus reception, 1,000-plus yards, but those touchdowns with that team wanting to be a run-first team, we'll see if they can do it with Anderson and the crew, but I think that the touchdowns are just going to be in that 5 to 7 range for Thomas, which is that won't be high-level 1 numbers, but it's going to be a nice wide receiver 2.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about Sammy Watkins. Sammy Watkins had a very good game last night. However you want to look at it, he was the go-to guy for Tyrod Taylor. I believe he had caught 4 of 5 passes last night, looked good on the field, and I think he might be the first guy in this wide receiver ranking show that we kind of, maybe debate a little bit more because he's across the board in our ranks. He's 13 here on our consensus, but that's because of Jason. Jason's got him at 11. I have him at 16. Mike, you have him at 21.
I have him too low.
Okay.
I have him too low.
And
right now, his average draft position, he's the 15th wide receiver off the board. So consensus,
there
we're higher than what people usually see in Sammy, and I am.
And
the
if
highest.
Mike moves him up, he's going to move up possibly even more in our ranks. The thing about Sammy Watkins is you kind of have to make a decision as an analyst and how you rank players. When do you start bumping up a guy because you have more confidence in his health? Because the payoff for Sammy Watkins could be incredible. It could be a guy
top 5 potential.
Right. And he's always been a player that can get separation pretty much whenever he wants it. He also is a guy that it's like there's a magnet when he goes deep and Tyrod throws that ball up. Tyrod throws a good deep ball. So even if you don't have 90 or 100 receptions, you have big play capabilities with a guy like Sammy Watkins. Number 13, that feels about right with big-time upside.
It's like Des Bryant. I mean, that's what you're getting with Sammy Watkins. You're not expecting a high volume of receptions. It's efficient targets, it's big plays, and it's touchdowns. And Sammy Watkins was one of the guys that I've been waiting to go all in on. You often will see a discrepancy in our rankings where Jason's got the full confidence in Sammy Watkins already. Mine has been growing, as the reports are still positive about him, seeing him actually get out there, seeing him get targeted. My confidence in him will grow. So he will not be 21 for much longer in my rankings because Jason has also brought up of his foot, where we've seen time and time again when players deal with his foot injury, it often takes that second surgery.
Bryant, Edelman.
Before they are ready to
Julio Jones.
Yeah, before they're ready to be back.
Yeah,
and he's had it.
And he's a contract year player.
Yeah, not just a normal contract year player. He's a contract year player with a giant chip on his shoulder because they didn't pick up his 5th year. Buffalo, what are you doing?
I don't know,
so,
man.
Yeah, I mean, that is one thing I want to bring up. Last year when you listened to the show, we talked about the fact that the foot problem he was having is so common to be re-aggravated and need a second surgery, so watch out. But we also said, and this was a year ago, if he gets a second surgery, it's pretty doggone reliable. All those players who have done it came out after the second surgery, and they've been fine, and they've been fantasy superstars. The talent for Sammy Watkins, I think people are starting to forget how talented. He's not a good wide receiver. Okay, in the historic 2014 draft class where Odell Beckham coming out of college was this unfathomable superstar, and Kelvin Benjamin was this monster. Mike Evans. I mean, just all of these guys, they went after Sammy Watkins in the draft for a reason.
They gave up a first-round pick to move up a couple spots for Sammy Watkins.
And the absolute truth is, I believe wholeheartedly that if the Buffalo Bills didn't take him, every single one of those teams that took a different wide receiver, they probably had Sammy Watkins higher on their draft board than they had Odell Beckham, and they did that for a reason, and he's shown it in the NFL. He's shown his flashes of unbelievable ability, except he's been injured, and I believe
second
this is
half
the
of
year.
2015, he was the wide receiver 7 in points per game, so that's a whole half of a season. Showed the ability. You believe it's his year.
I do.
I made the call in my article. I thought he'd play 16 games. I want to see it. You talk about things on my list of want to see in fantasy football this season. I want to see a healthy Sammy Watkins.
Yeah.
I want to see what the possible ceiling really is. Now, what were we going to say?
I don't want us to paint. I do believe he he will not re-injure that foot. I don't want to paint a picture, though, for listeners that he doesn't carry risk. He certainly does. Yeah. He's been injury-prone, so you have to weigh that at the draft.
Yeah, and you're semi-protected. If you do get him in the 4th round somehow,
right,
that's the golden place to be. So before we talk about 14 and 15 on our wide receiver ranking list, I want to thank the sponsors of today's show, and they're good ones, Foot Clan. They're great. If you know anything about us, we vet our sponsors. We say no to a lot of different people that want to come on and pitch a product or tell something about, sell something to you. Today's sponsor, FantasyChamps.com. FantasyChamps.com. You are talking about an absolutely stunning pile of fantasy football hardware for your league. You need a trophy. You need a championship ring. You need a belt. Or right now, one of the big things, the fantasy football draft board. Okay, you need one of the boards with the stickers and the marker. Look, they've got it all at fantasychamps.com, and I'm telling you, the quality of the products is amazing. Like, we have them all. We've had them ship all of them to us. We've looked at all of them.
Vet them all.
Look, they laser engrave on metal. Like
premium
metal, not plastic,
beams.
Not cheap plastic products on metal, and the difference is breathtaking. I'm telling you, these are awesome, and we've got a deal. You put Ballers, the coupon code Ballers in, whether it's for a draft board or a trophy or whatever you need for your fantasy league, you get 10% off your order. So you go to fantasychamps.com, promo code Ballers. That's fantasychamps.com, promo code Ballers. Get that trophy for your league. Get all of the engraved champions of years past, put on that trophy. It's awesome.
I mean, this entire show is about being the fantasy champ. Right?
That's a good place to go.
So go to fantasy champs.
Check it out. You'll realize once you stop at the URL that this is the go-to place for all your fantasy trophy needs.
100%. Also, Pristine Auction. You've heard us talk about them for years for a reason.
We are BFFs with Pristine Auction.
We are best friends with Pristine Auction.
We are the 3 best friends.
Signed memorabilia, signed jerseys, signed helmets, everything we give away on this show, it's always from Pristine Auction because we always know that it is 100%
Yeah, we go buy it. We go buy it off of there.
We really do, and it's certified, guaranteed, authentic signatures. It's an auction system, so get in the habit of just like checking in and stealing some of these items for prices that are cheaper than you could go buy a jersey out of a store and it's signed. I mean, sometimes when I see the stuff Mike gets, pretty much every day.
That's a fair statement.
And they have the elite stuff too. If you want to get in on the Babe Ruth signed ball for. If you're
a
collector, they've got everything there. So check them out. Any great gift ideas, you're just not going to do better than Pristine Auction. It's Pristine auction.com.
I'm just going to throw this out there. Today they have a signed Deion Sanders jersey.
Oh. I just watched a video on YouTube. Just to be a distraction for a second. I just watched a YouTube video. I got caught up in the Deion Sanders versus
Jerry Rice
video
where he goes to give him the handshake.
No, and it was all their battles. It was
that's what I mean.
Yeah.
It's him lined up, and he's like just goading him. Like, you want a handshake? Like, let's go.
That was pretty cool. All right, 14 and 15 on our wide receiver rankings. Alshon Jeffery, Terrelle Pryor, 2 hotly debated players, 2 players that we are in different places on. Alshon, I got him at 20. Jason and Mike, you got him at 15. Mine has to do with the mix of moving teams, something that is not always a success in fantasy football or in NFL football for a big-time wide receiver. You move a team, you're in a different system, different quarterback, and he's got
you're going to need to hit a button.
And he's got the injury risk.
You're going to need to hit a button.
Do we got it?
Breaking news.
Adam Schefter is saying that Cowboys running back Ezekiel Elliott is expected to appeal his 6-game suspension per sources. So he has 3 days to appeal what is a 6-game ban.
Now,
Brooks, I know you are a Cowboys fan.
How do you feel? He's not only a Cowboys fan. Brooks has Zeke in our Dynasty League. You're in my division, aren't you?
Maybe.
So here's the deal. He can appeal. It's possible that we've seen suspensions of this nature be appealed and brought down to 4 games, but that
looks like that's the way to approach it. a lock of missing 4 games.
A lock of missing 4 games, but we also have to keep in mind this appeal, because it's a 6-game ban, is super scary to me, because what happens is, let's say he appeals and it takes them half the season to come back with their...
It shouldn't, but that's in the realm of possibility.
It shouldn't have taken this long. I mean,
we'll know a lot more soon, so we'll be able to talk more about that on Monday as well. But breaking news on the show.
Yeah, that's...
Mike, Jason, right now, if it's 6 games, both of you hadn't adjusted him yet, where does he go?
6 games.
Because he's going to go... He'll probably go down up for mine. I mean, he'll probably stay where he's at. I have him at 8.
No, he's going to be lower than that for me.
Probably a 3rd round.
That's exactly what I think. I mean, I'm going to take some time, after the show.
Yeah, this is just gut reaction.
Yeah, take some time after the show, really crunch some numbers and see the different outcomes. And Monday we'll be able to speak to it with clarity and a direction. But right now, my instinct says 3rd round is probably where I would. Man, that stinks.
Well, hey, Zeke.
Get it together.
Wake up call, man.
Get it together. Wake up call is right.
You don't get to do whatever you want and just
play.
Yeah,
there's some things you don't mess around with. And this is one of those things.
Right now, if you're on the clock
where's
in any of the play draft leagues,
you go
grab Darren McFadden immediately.
Unbelievable. All right, back to Alshon, guys. I do like Carson Wentz. I think he could surprise people this year.
He looked good yesterday.
He did. And Alshon is a player that has, massive impact potential. But because, again, I think in this offseason, now he's back already, but he's already had another soft tissue type of issue. There's too much pause for me. Here's the thing. Maybe he's good. Maybe he's a good fantasy football wide receiver for your team. I don't want to deal with it.
Yeah,
there are some players you don't want to mess. I don't want to deal with I'm going to have excitement for Alshon Jeffery, and then he's going to come up lame in practice, and then I'm going to wonder if I can play him on Sunday, and then I'm going to wonder if he's 100% back for the next game, or if he's going to be a decoy out there. I don't want to do it.
Yeah, I don't blame you. When I look at the rankings, you've got him 20, I've got him 15 along with Mike. I think to myself, man, I really don't like Alshon at 15 for me, and it's not because he doesn't have the ability to do that. I believe in Carson Wentz this coming season. I'm buying more and more into his ability to allow Alshon to be a true wide receiver 1, and I'm speaking of a fantasy wide receiver 1. But with Alshon, I can't just think, okay, well, he's going to play 16 games. And his ceiling to me is not, say, what Sammy Watkins' ceiling. They both, have injury risks, but I don't think Alshon is a true world beater. He's just a really, good receiver.
Well,
and so
he's a player who, when he's too far down in your rankings, you're like, oh man, I definitely need to move him up.
Yeah.
And when he's too high, and then you move him up, and you're like, man, I got to move him down.
It's weird you say that, because that's exactly how it's been for me this whole offseason.
Yeah, I moved him up to like 13 at one point in the early offseason. I was like, ooh.
He had basically 800 yards in 11 games. So I mean, he
didn't score though.
Yeah, no, I know, but we know that touchdowns can come and go. But
historically he's been fine at scoring.
He is so big, man. He's so big. He has a good wide receiver.
Here's the nice thing about Alshon, though. Yeah. Let me make the case for Alshon Jeffery.
Okay.
He has come over and he's taken a prove it deal with an up and coming quarterback on
allegedly
offense.
Turned down more money
Correct.
To go to play for Minnesota.
He wants to prove that he is an elite wide receiver. Right now, he's in the 4th round. Okay, so when we're talking draft value, he's not bad for where he's going in your draft. I would be super happy to have Alshon in the 4th round. And if he stays healthy, I think he's got a floor that is probably around, wide receiver 18. So there's enough there to like. But as someone that owned Alshon, last year in a lot of different places and had to deal with the constant injuries, his to me are, the nice thing with the Sammy injury is that he dealt with this foot problem forever, and I believe it's fixed. You don't really fix soft tissue issues. I mean, they heal, and then hopefully you just don't run into them again.
You hope to find new training habits that prevent them. That's all you can do.
Right, but we've already seen it this offseason.
Carson Wentz had the 5th most attempts last year. I mean, you don't want in on that volume?
I'm like Jason said, if the value's there, late 4th round, if he sneaks down that far, maybe I take the chance. But it's just a little bit.
Yeah, no, I get it.
I'd rather have the next guy on this list. Let's put it that way. Terrelle Pryor, number 15. I have him at 10. He's a top 10 wide receiver for me. Guys, we've talked about him a lot on the show. Last year he was a wide receiver 1 or 2 in 50% of his games. The raw ability of Terrelle Pryor, the long history of getting from where he was as a quarterback to where he is now. Now he's in a system. Look, this is not a coincidence that he's in Washington. Hugh Jackson and Jay Gruden were coaches that watched him work out years ago and gave him opportunity. Jay Gruden brought him in. Hugh Jackson had him first. Now he's with another coach that believes in him and the ability that he has. And when you look at what Washington could not do last season, they couldn't score in the red zone. They didn't have size. Now you have not only Pryor, but you have Doxson, who has size if he's healthy. The offense should be good. Pryor's going to do the things that he's great at, which is create separation with super long arms and be a difference maker in the red zone. As a believer in Kirk Cousins, as a believer in Terrelle Pryor, the 306 price point right now in drafts, I love it. Give him to me.
He was sensational last year, and he's a deep threat. Like Andy said, he was able to be a wide receiver 1 or 2 50% of the time, and that's with some of the worst downfield targets of all of last year coming from the Browns quarterbacks. Now he goes to Kirk Cousins, who's one of the best, most accurate deep ball throwers in the league. If you want to put that, say, well, that's on D-Jax and Jordan Reed. That's the wide receivers are doing it, but the numbers are there for Kirk Cousins that say he's a great deep thrower. So I'm with you that the ceiling of Terrelle Pryor is – I mean, the ceiling can't hold us.
Oh, yeah, it can. Yeah, it can.
Is that your – I didn't say your ranking because I don't know if that's where you want him. Jay, is that where he belongs?
That is
I thought you were getting that Terrelle Pryor.
Yes, I was.
What happened to that fire?
He's 25.
I moved him up to 25.
I thought you got caught up in –
No, the Terrelle Pryor. You get caught up in No,
he didn't get caught up in the.
I didn't get caught up enough to be swept away to Oz like you guys have with your tornado. No, here is the.
We're not in Washington anymore.
No, the problem is we are in Washington.
You should have said we're not in Cleveland anymore.
So
that's what you should have said.
Oh, that would have been way better.
You missed it, Mike. I know.
All right, let me make the case here.
Well, no, we got to move on because I ruined the joke.
Go ahead, Jay.
All right, so
Terrelle Pryor.
Last year you had a great offense. Kirk Cousins was a top.
I thought he was talking about Cleveland for a second.
No, Kirk Cousins was a top 12 quarterback in fantasy, and the problem is you had back in the rankings Deshaun Jackson, Jamison Crowder, and Pierre Garçon because he spreads the ball around. Kirk Cousins is not a guy to target that number 1 wide receiver, and if he is, it's going to be Jordan Reed. You got Jordan Reed. You got Jamison Crowder. You've got Josh Doxson. You've got Terrelle Pryor. Now, if Terrelle Pryor becomes the 1B, if he becomes the 1B to Jordan Reed, then I think he has the chance to, have a decent season. I don't see the possibility of a top 10. I mean, you've got him at 10. And I'm glad we've got a little bit of a polar opinion here. I'm interested to see who's going to win out. But when I just look at all the volume and how it has to split up, it would just have to go so much towards Terrelle Pryor.
I don't know what's happening. I don't know which episode to tune into. I mean,
I thought you were rising.
I know this is the most confusing thing in the world because it's like I think there are 4 episodes that I could find where half the time you're high on him and the other half of the time you're telling us to be quiet. By the way, I am on the clock in best ball, but I already have Darren McFadden.
Oh, all right. So here, just to clear it up, because you might be new to the fantasy footballers and you haven't been tracking along, and sometimes we assume, okay, you've heard previous episodes, you knew or know where my opinion was at. I had Terrelle Pryor at about 30. And I realized that is too low, and I've been bumping him up, and now he's at 25, and maybe that is also too low. Maybe he can get up to 20. 15. I mean, I'm not saying he doesn't have a ceiling that can get there. If he finishes as the wide receiver 15, I would love that. I really like Terrelle Pryor. I think he is talented. All of those things, but you have to be realistic. This is a stats-based game we play, and he has to have the production that comes from that. So I am rising on Terrelle Pryor. I like Terrelle Pryor, and that puts him, to me, pretty much as a wide receiver 2. So maybe I am a little low, having him at 25. Maybe he should be more around 20. I just don't see him being a true fantasy wide receiver 1 this year.
I think the one thing we can agree on with Terrelle Pryor is whenever we sing his name, we need in the video to superimpose an explosion someone flying through the screen.
All right, let's try to move a little faster through some more of these so we can get through. Michael Crabtree and Allen Robinson are 16 and 17 on our rankings. Michael Crabtree has a firm believer in Mike, who has him at number 10.
Yep.
In that Terrelle Pryor range. I have him lower.
It's ironic. It's the exact opposite rankings. I had Terrelle Pryor at 25. Andy had him at 10. Mike, you've got Crabtree at 10, and Andy's got him at 25. So
tied for 4th in red zone targets, 21, 9th in total receptions. Right now, his average draft position is beautiful. It's the 5th round pick, and that's why Mike loves him so much, I'm sure.
Yes.
Look, he gets touchdown opportunities, the kind that you can't always count on for Amari Cooper. They've always been there for Crabtree in this offense, and last year, a big number that jumps out to me, 62% of the time, he was a wide receiver 1 or a wide receiver 2. He is a beautiful wide receiver 2 for your fantasy team. I'd feel great rolling him out there week in, week out, knowing the target share is going to be there. Love Michael Crabtree. I'm not sure that there's a lot to debate other than the fact that he's not going to give you the kind of, I think, ceiling maybe. He's not a top 5 potential guy. He's not Sammy Watkins.
Not.
But you can get him at, he could certainly outperform Watkins.
And I have him at 10, but I mean he's like Demaryius Thomas. I mean I think that Crabtree is a very, very safe wide receiver too, who slips into the 5th round, which is absolutely ridiculous. I don't know what people want from Michael Crabtree. His first year with Carr, he was, I think, wide receiver 18. Then he was a wide receiver 1 last year. You know that Derek Carr is going to throw for around 4,000 yards and around 30 touchdowns. And Crabtree has the trust of Derek Carr in the red zone and in the end zone, unlike Amari Cooper, because when you look at their contested catch rate, Amari Cooper, he can't grab the ball. I mean, he's got like a 50% contested catch rate. Meanwhile, Michael Crabtree grades out as one of the best, and I'm getting those numbers from Matt Harmon's reception perception, which you can find in our Ultimate Draft Kit, which is a kind of like a theory of why is Amari Cooper not getting these targets, and maybe it's because Derek Carr knows that when the coverage is tight on Amari Cooper, he can't feel assured that Cooper's going to come down with it. Meanwhile, he knows that if he puts the ball where Crabtree can catch it, he's going to come down with it. So I love him. A 10 is certainly an aggressive ranking on him, but I want people to know that I'm all in on Crabtree at his draft position, and I'd grab him in the 4th happily.
Jason, talk about Allen Robinson. Allen Robinson, Jacksonville Jaguar, interesting stat. Look, he had a yards per reception. I think those are those in there backwards?
Which?
I think they're in there backwards. The yard per reception for Allen Robinson.
Well, in 2014, it was his rookie year. His yards per reception were low. And then his breakout year, he jumped up to
17.5 yards per reception.
And then last year, he was back down.
Oh, okay.
So
I see
he was
what
much
you did.
closer to his rookie year.
Yeah, that got it. I was reading it as 2015 and 2016. I was confused. All right, so talk about Allen Robinson, Jay.
Yeah, so Allen Robinson was, the new hotness last year. He was a first-rounder for everybody's draft because coming into his second year, he had that explosion where he had 14 touchdowns, 1,400 yards, and you knew he's the centerpiece of that offense. And of course, Blake Bortles, he's coming up in the world. And then all of a sudden last year, Blake Bortles was exposed for Blake Bortles, and you saw the touchdown regression that was – sure to come, go from 14 to 6, which is
plummeted.
Monstrous. What a lot of people don't realize is he had the exact same amount of targets. So both years, he had 151 targets. The way I view Allen Robinson is this. He is a very good wide receiver, and I'm hoping that Blake Bortles can get the job done. This is a team that's shifting away from the passing game to the running game.
Well, and I heard the running game's really easy. Leonard Fournette told me that the NFL is easy.
Right. I saw that report. So
Be careful.
I cannot fathom that Allen Robinson gets 151 receptions for the third time.
Targets?
Targets, yes. Whoa, that would be amazing. I expect him to drop 20 targets this season. That being said, if the running game is better, people come up. I think what we're going to experience is kind of an in-between place where on 130 targets, you're going to have a guy who has more efficiency than he had last year, never again going to get it to the point of 2015, and he'll be a solid wide receiver too. I expect him to be more consistent this season than he was last season, but I don't think he has a ceiling that the people
like
drafting
Terrelle Pryor.
The people drafting Allen Robinson right now, I think they still hope that he has that like top 5 potential. I don't see that.
All right, let's touch on 18 and 19 in our rankings. DeAndre Hopkins and Brandin Cooks. What are the storylines here for these guys? Right now, Hopkins drafted in the 3rd round, Cooks drafted in the 3rd round, basically back-to-back. A lot of different things we could talk about, but Hopkins specifically, I think we all agree he's super talented, hyper-talented guy. It's just a matter of the offense being able to provide enough targets and enough consistent catchable targets for him to be fantasy relevant.
Yeah, and that's what people – it's like Allen Robinson. Allen Robinson and Hopkins are difficult because you know that the talent is there, but will the volume be there? They're both on a defense first, a run first offense, and Hopkins' superstar production came when the defense had fallen apart and they were playing catch-up, and DeAndre Hopkins was getting all the targets in the passing game. So I think that people are going to be sadly disappointed once again in Hopkins. Not that he'll be awful for your team, but what you expect out of a 3rd-round pick and thinking you're stealing a really high upside guy, I don't see it.
All right, let's touch on Brandin Cooks. I got to drop there's the train, because the hype train on Brandin Cooks is heading down the tracks right now. Every report out of Patriots camp, it's pictures of one-handed catches. It's disintegrating the defense with that speed, and he's a great player. I don't think we doubt the capability. Do you buy the hype on Brandin Cooks that you've been hearing, and does it make you adjust your rankings? I got him at 17, Mike 27, Jason 13. Is that a result of some of what you've seen in camp?
It is a direct result of some of what I've seen. I mean, his rapport with Tom Brady looks on, a terrific pace. This is a guy that
they say he's picking up the offense
a wide
quick.
receiver 1 already. I mean, he had Drew Brees, so we have to keep in mind it's not like he's upgrading quarterbacks. Yes, Tom Brady is the GOAT, but for fantasy, both of those quarterbacks are
excellent.
Are excellent.
GOAT brothers.
They both spread the ball around, so the situation isn't really changing that much. The problem we've always had in fantasy with Brandin Cooks is his disappearing acts and his inconsistency. He'll light the world on fire and then disappear. We have said that that's because the ball gets spread around a lot. I actually think that there will be more consistency with, or at least the chance for more consistency with Tom Brady than with Drew Brees. And so I've moved him up to 13 in my rankings. He is a guy that has the potential to, be a top 10 wide receiver. What he's shown
at the end.
Here's an easy question. Do you want him as your 1? Because you have to take him in the back of the 2nd round in a PPR league.
Right now,
are you cool with that? If you had a guy like Landry to balance him out?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm starting to be more comfortable. The problem is, no, I think I would. I think right now in the back of the 2nd, I think I would take Brandin Cooks, which that's really been changing. I mean,
you said it out loud, and the first step is acceptance.
Yeah, that is. I feel bad to say that out loud.
That's just because the fear has been there. But if there is new information that convinces you of his potential, look, he'll win you a week. So if he can give you enough those other weeks, he's going to be worth it. Let's talk about Larry Fitzgerald, number 20, Golden Tate, number 21. I'll touch on Larry Fitzgerald real quick. Last year, I am at 15, so that's the highest of our group. Last year, he led the league in receptions, 107 receptions. He's a 5th-round pick in PPR leagues, a 6th-round pick in standard. I think people need to realize that Larry does have the ability to still give you red zone targets and touchdowns. I mean, he had 6 last year, but this is a guy who over the last 2 seasons finished 9th in fantasy in 2015, finished 12th last year. The kind of thing I want fantasy owners to know as I talk about Larry is that he started hot each of the last 2 years.
Yes.
Last year he had 5 weeks right up until the bye, basically, where he was a top 24 guy, but he had some really down weeks in the back half of the year, 3 straight weeks outside the top 40 to end the season. So I think basically I think we see here in the notes it says guilty of a monster start. Well, yeah, that helps that end-of-season number. But if you can get him, if he can give you those early season numbers and you can move him, maybe that's a strategy fantasy owners want to take.
His touchdown upside is capped by David Johnson because that's the offense runs through DJ now. And what's weird about Fitz falling off at the end of the season, that's when Carson Palmer was actually playing better. So those things, the graph looks really bizarre.
Also had basically no John Brown for a huge chunk of the season,
right.
And hopefully Brown's back in the mix.
So I wouldn't overlook Larry because of his age. I think in the around that 6th round is perfectly fine, especially in a PPR because, like Andy said, he did lead the league in receptions, mostly because Antonio Brown took the last week off. But 100 receptions is still in the realm of outcomes for Larry Fitzgerald.
Are you expecting more of the same from Golden Tate, number 21 on our rankings? I have him the lowest of this group because I do think Marvin Jones is going to have an impact in that offense. I like
what about those smooth routes, man?
You want me to put that on again?
Oh,
Smooth routes.
those smooth routes.
Kenny Galladay. Man, that is a drop. Eric Ebron's health. Those things factor in. But Golden Tate, he's moving all over the offense. There's no more Anquan Bolden. Jason, what do you think about Golden Tate this year? Is he going to keep it going in terms of fantasy value?
Yeah, he will. He's a slightly less consistent player over the last few years. You know, a lot of his fantasy production has come in spurts, and he's, you know, we saw when Marvin Jones was on fire in the beginning of the year. Golden Tate was non-existent.
Golden Tate fantasy Benjamin Buttoned.
Right, yeah. Golden Tate last year was not involved in the beginning of the season, and then they're like, wait, we should throw to Golden Tate because he's better than Marvin Jones, and then he had a really good rest of season. So you have to ask yourself, is there the chance that repeats, like Andy's saying, if Ebron is more involved and if Marvin Jones, you know, is more involved, can Golden Tate still have a chunk of the season where he disappears? I think they will avoid that this year. And if you're in a PPR league, Golden Tate definitely gets a bump because he's pretty much locked and loaded for 90 receptions. If he gets 100 receptions, you know, that's very realistic. So those points are going to push you over the edge when you can get a guy in the 5th round, 6th round in some leagues. I've seen him dropping there. If you're in a PPR half point, I do like Golden Tate this year.
All right, I'm going to give you a couple big names to round out our top 24, and then I want us to share one or two sleepers, maybe one that's like a middle-tier sleeper, maybe one that's a deep sleeper in your mind at the wide receiver position for the listeners. But couple big names at 23-24, Keenan Allen and Davante Adams. All right, Keenan Allen and Davante Adams. I'll speak for a second on Davante because I made a tweet last night. It was really tongue-in-cheek. I saw Davante.
Or as your tweet said, tongue and cheek.
Yeah, I accidentally said tongue and cheek. It's both. It's a little tongue. It's a little cheek.
Whoa.
But
no.
Davante Adams, I have him the lowest of us. I thought last year was a perfect storm for Adams in terms of Cobb's lack of health, in terms of Cook's lack of health. You have Martellus Bennett back. Cobb looks pretty good. And he averaged a touchdown every 6.3 receptions. He only had, I believe, 75 receptions on the season. So I'm not trying to destroy Davante Adams. I just think there's a world where Jordy Nelson, Randall Cobb, Ty Montgomery, you know, Martellus Bennett, they all have a heavy target share that just makes Adams reliant on those kind of touchdown totals.
Yeah.
Now, could he do it again? Yeah, because he's got Aaron Rodgers and they're in the red zone every 30 seconds.
Yeah, when you look back on the historical data of Aaron Rodgers' career, he easily supports 2 fantasy wide receivers, and we know one will be Jordy. It's the projection of that too. It's which I believe it'll be Adams. And could it be Cobb? Certain it could, because we've seen it from Randall Cobb, but we basically haven't seen that since 2014 when Randall Cobb was the wide receiver 7. So I'm good taking Adams in the back of the 4th round, and I'm fine knowing who he is for my roster. He's a touchdown guy, but last year wide receiver 1 or 2, 43, almost 44% of the time. I'll take that, because when he explodes, it's going to be great.
Yeah, I would just say for Adams, much better value in a standard league, because he is going to be a touchdown-centric player. So if you're in a PPR league, I would move him down a little. If standard, I'd move him up a little.
All right, you guys want to give me a couple sleepers? Yeah,
the middle-tier sleeper that I was already thinking of, I'll hop right in. It is Randall Cobb. Right now, Randall Cobb is, the 40th wide receiver off the board in the back of the 8th round. And if the touchdowns shifted from Davante Adams to Randall Cobb, Davante Adams was a wide receiver 1. I mean, Randall Cobb has been a wide receiver 1 before. I mean, I believe he has that middle tier, draft price where he also has the ability to actually finish as a 1. It's very rare that you can get middle or late a guy that could finish at the wide receiver 12 overall, but that's just Aaron Rodgers. That's 100%. I want to be a part of that, quarterback.
The name I want to throw out that people don't forget. Do not forget about Cameron Meredith. He was excellent last year, and he did whatever the team needed him to do. Outside, play the slot. He excelled in both.
First 2 Glennon targets last night, straight to Meredith.
And
both terrible passes. But they went straight to Meredith.
Mike Glennon may not be long for this starting position. Trubisky against lower level defenses, but still looked like he can play in the NFL. And Cam Meredith is just so good and fantasy players are going to completely bail on the Bears wide receivers. Do not forget about Cam Meredith around the 10th, 9th round.
Yeah, I'll throw Rashard Matthews out there as a middle-tier guy. Not really a sleeper, but still somebody that's a value. And I'll throw a deep sleeper out there, Paul Richardson of the Seattle Seahawks. If he earns the starting wide receiver 2 position, we've talked about when Russell Wilson's healthy, getting out of the pocket. I'd love to just see what Richardson can do with more targets, because he made huge plays last year, but the target share has not been there. So deep sleeper, again, that was the question. So I'll throw Paul Richardson's name out there too. Now next week, we're going to talk best ball here for a second, but next week I wanted to let everyone know we've got a mock draft coming on Monday. We also have our preseason thoughts. We'll have more Zeke thoughts. So keep it right here. Subscribe. Make sure you're listening to the show next week. Let's talk best ball.
Best Ball Bonanza, brought to you by PlayDraft.
If you don't know about it, PlayDraft is the best place to play best ball DFS. You draft. We're in the middle of a draft right now. I am on the clock. I have not made my pick.
And if you don't know what best ball is, essentially you draft a ginormous roster on PlayDraft. It's 18 rounds, and then each week the computer fills in your optimal lineup, and then at the end of the season, someone wins some cash. I mean, you do the draft, and you're done.
Yep, and Jason has some tips for you today. We do basically a best ball tip every Friday during this segment. And, Jason, what do you got for the peoples?
Well, today's an important one. It probably should have been the first one we went through, is just roster construction, like how many players at each position you draft. We always say, you want to stay water and have different strategies. Any strategy works. With best ball, I would say it's a little bit different, because you have to have a certain player pool to maximize how many positions you're starting. So you've got a total of 18 players on your roster. There's no defense, no kickers. If you're doing best ball on PlayDraft, you'll have to deal with defense and kickers on some of the other best ball formats out there. But I see a lot of teams where when they tweet me and they say, "Hey, how's my team look?" they stuck to essentially what we usually do in our normal drafts, which is they've got as many running backs or more than they have wide receivers. That's a mistake in this format. In half-point PPR, which is their scoring format, where you have to have 3 wide receivers cracking that roster every week, you need to have your larger pool there. So what I like to do is make sure I've got like one stud running back at least, because I'm going to be in that 4, 5, 6 range of running backs at the end of the draft, but I want at least 6 wide receivers, at least 6. And when it comes to the quarterback and the tight end, if you are waiting late on those positions, you can grab 3 of them. You know, if you grab Aaron Rodgers at a good value early, then just go 2. But 3 at that position, you know, those make a big difference. There was I saw this from our good friend Scott Barrett. For reference, last year, if you had Tyrod Taylor, Marcus Mariota, and Blake Bortles, you would have outscored the combo of Matt Ryan and Drew Brees last year. So that gives you an idea. Wait on the quarterback position and grab 3 late quarterbacks. Wow. Because, you know, you just need one of them to hit every week. Chances are pretty good that that's going to happen.
All right, if you want to play best ball, you can go to playdraft.com/ballers, and you get a free entry into a best ball league where you can win some cash. Also, before we close out the show, it's going to be a big day for Ultimate Draft Kit updates today. We're gonna do our Zeke updates, a bunch of other players. We might be touching some of the sleepers and the breakouts. And stay tuned for Monday with the mock draft and the preseason week 1 highlights.
The parting Zeke thought I want to give everyone is
better hurry.
Their bye week is week 6. So that means you would not get Ezekiel Elliott until week 8.
Wait.
Right.
That's crazy.
Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Fantasy Footballers Podcast. Join our fantasy football community on jointhefoot.com and follow us on Twitter @TheFFBallers.